If you're wondering what kind of gear you need for snorkeling, freediving, or scuba diving, this video is for you. Hello there, my name is Lou and I'm a certified freediver and open water scuba diver living in Melbourne. Now, let's say you want to go snorkeling, or you want to take up freediving or scuba diving. Where do you even start? What kind of gear do you need? In this video, we're going to go over the basics of gear, explaining the key differences between the gear needed for each of these disciplines, helping you choose the right gear for you. Alright, first things first, let's start off with snorkeling. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, there's really only two things you need to go snorkeling, namely a mask and a snorkel. Now, of course, having fins also helps because it'll be easier to swim around, but really, if you're short for gear, you can go out with a mask and a snorkel. So let's start with that. Now, there are many different types of masks out there. And in this video, I'm not going to go over the specifics of different types of masks. There's a different video where I'll be covering that. But essentially, if you're going out snorkeling for the first time, you don't have to worry about that. You just need to have a mask that fits well. Follow-up question, how do you know that a mask fits well? Essentially, when you get to a shop and find out a mask, what you want to do is place it on top of your face like this and make sure that it vacuum seals so that it doesn't fall off like this. If it says here placed like this, it's good. The other piece of equipment you'll need for snorkeling is, you guessed it, a snorkel. Now, you've got different types of snorkels out there. So for snorkeling at the beginning, this is a semi-dry snorkel, which essentially means it's got this kind of like guard at the top that will prevent a lot of water from going in. As you see, it's a little bit bent. And it's got a little purge valve at the bottom. So if water comes into your snorkel, something that you do, like you just literally blow into the snorkel very strongly, and that'll push the water out. With a semi-dry snorkel, it's easier to do that. These two mechanisms make it easier to do that. Now, there's also completely dry snorkels where this is completely sealed off. And if you're a beginner snorkeler, that might be the best way to go because it is like hassle-free and you don't need to be worrying so much about plunging your snorkel. I guess the only downside to a dry snorkel would be that they're bulkier, they float very easy. So if you want to go down and up, they create a lot of drag. Even this bendy bit with this semi-dry one creates quite a bit of drag because it just does this when you're swimming down. So if you're a free diver, you're better off with a J snorkel, which is just like solid and it has none of this extra little fancy little things. But then you have to be really good at purging your snorkel. So something for everyone. If you're a snorkeler as well, you can also opt for a full face mask, but that's just if you're going to stay on the surface and just do casual snorkeling. If you're wanting to advance to scuba or freediving, really not worth it because you will need these ones further down the track. Okay, so next up in the snorkeling section, as I mentioned, you can also add fins. Now, again, many different types of fins out there. I think the key thing here is you have kind of like medium-sized fins. You have very short fins, which I don't have, but I'll put a picture up. And you have long-ass freediving fins. So which ones do you choose? As a snorkeler or as a scuba diver, I'd go for this medium-sized ones. They're long enough that they will really help you swim without effort. But they're not as long as the freediving ones where like this ones get really messy if you're not swimming at depth. Because as you can see, because they're so long, and if you're in the shallows, they will kick up all the sand and make it really, really cloudy. And if you're swimming on top of a coral reef, you really risk damaging the reef with this longer fins. So if you're practicing depth, yes, excellent, no fins. If you're practicing just snorkeling or scuba diving, you're better off with these ones. Now, these ones that I have here have those little straps rather than kind of like the boot of this longer fins. It's really a personal preference, but the good things about this ones is you can really adjust them to your size so that they make the perfect fit. Another thing about open-heeled fins is that if you're swimming in cold waters, these are actually better because you can wear a boot, so then your foot is quite warm and you can adjust this accordingly. Now, other optional extras within the snorkeling section, if you're feeling a bit more confident and you want to start going down to explore a little bit of the corals and things that you're looking at underwater, you will need a weight belt. Now, with weight belts, you have two options. You have rubber, like this one, or you have this one nylon-based instead. If you're scuba diving or thinking about scuba diving, nylon is usually the way to go. If you're a free diver, rubber is better. And this is just because with freediving, you go down like vertically rather than just like deflating your BCD and going down horizontally. So because you're doing kind of like this movement a lot, the rubber one kind of like sticks to your body more easily, so it doesn't go up and down every time you go down. You can really tighten it better. But if you're doing scuba, then yeah, the nylon one will do great. As I said in another video, I will also talk about how do you determine what's the weight that you need and how to determine your buoyancy. So we'll cover that another time. But yeah, essentially weight belt, a couple of weights. There's everything from 0.5 kilo to 1.5 kilo weights. So depending on the weight you need, you'll know how much to add. And depending on the amount of, like, if you've got a wetsuit on, that'll also determine how much weight you need. Talking about wetsuits. If you're swimming in cold waters, you probably also want a wetsuit. So with wetsuits, again, if you're in the Caribbean, like, don't even worry about wetsuits, you just need a bathing suit and that's it. But if you're living in Melbourne, like myself, you will definitely need a wetsuit. So this is, again, a very personal decision. Everybody gets cold at different temperatures, so you'll know what you need. The thinnest, like, you can go for a rashi, which is just like essentially like a shirt that covers you a little bit. And that's also good for protecting you for things like, you know, corals and things that can scrape you while you're snorkeling. So that's a good kind of like easy option for temperate waters. If the water is cold, you'll need a thicker thing. And you can go anything from a 3mm wetsuit, which is good for, like, I don't know, if you're like me, for anything around like 20 degrees outside and maybe like, yeah, like, I don't know, 16 to 20 on the water. I get cold really easily. But then if the water is colder, so if it's like middle of winter or if the water is like 14 degrees, you will want at least a 5mm wetsuit. Now you have open cell, which is like this one. This is an open cell wetsuit. And essentially the open cell means like the material inside is different to the neoprene that's outside, and it kind of keeps the warmth better. So yeah, an open cell wetsuit will usually be warmer, and it's kind of like it glides easier with water. So like there's even like smooth skin wetsuits. So if you're a free diver, smooth skin wetsuit is quite good because then, like, again, the drag from the water will decrease. But neoprene is more durable and kind of like strong and resistant. If you're starting off, neoprene is fine. Don't worry about the open cell bit. And you could go for a 7mm open 7mm just neoprene if you're very cold. Now, moving on to freediving gear, and we've kind of already touched on some of these things while I was covering the snorkeling gear, but just recapping and highlighting. So it's pretty much the same equipment with slight differences. So with a mask, if you're thinking of going into freediving, you really want a low volume mask, just because it's easier to equalize at depth with less air. You probably want to go for a J snorkel without the fancy valves and whatnot, because it has less drag. With the fins, again, if you're going into freediving, you do want the long freediving fins because they allow you to cover longer distances with less effort. Now, with the freediving fins, they come in plastic, carbon fiber, and fiberglass. Carbon fiber and fiberglass are better than plastic, but if you're just starting out, start off with the plastic because the other ones are quite a bit more expensive. So you can work your way up to it to see first if you actually really like it and really want to commit. A step up from plastic would be fiberglass. They do give you a bit more efficiency in terms of energy input. However, they're also a bit more stiffer than plastic, which makes them a bit more fragile. So if you really want to go like best bang for buck, go carbon fiber, but they are very expensive. So you need to like know that that's an investment that you want to make. If not, start off with plastic. With the wetsuits, again, opt for a smooth skin wetsuit, and with the weight belt for a rubber weight belt, because it'll move up and down less and it'll sit tight, snugly to your body. So a smooth skin wetsuit is made from open cell neoprene inside and a rubbery material outside. The rubbery material on the outside is actually hydrophobic, so it makes you drag less as you glide through the water. And the material, the open cell neoprene inside, is actually warmer, so it keeps you warmer and yeah, just warmer in general. So the pros of having a smooth skin wetsuit is essentially you're more hydrodynamic, so it reduces drags and you can move quicker in water, and it's also warmer. The cons though is it tends to be more delicate, as well as more expensive. So if you're thinking of going into competitive freediving, for example, excellent choice. But if you're thinking of just snorkeling and whatnot, maybe not such a good choice, because as soon as you, I don't know, scrape next to a rock or something, the wetsuit will be damaged. And the efficiencies that it's giving you, you're not really going to use to the biggest extent because you're just exploring. Now, most snorkeling and scuba diving gear will be just like normal neoprene. And in that sense, it is more durable and like, yeah, it won't break as easy if you bump against a rock or anything like that. It's also easier to put on because an open cell or a smooth skin wetsuit, you actually have to put like soapy water on the inside to go into it. Otherwise you'll just get stuck like Ross in that episode of Friends. With the normal neoprene wetsuit, you don't have to do that. So it's easier. It does take a bit longer to dry, but again, it's kind of like a tougher choice. So yeah, if you're thinking of going out snorkeling or scuba diving, just go for a normal neoprene. Now, another extra that you will need for both freediving and scuba diving is a dive computer. Essentially what you want a dive computer to tell you is how long you've been underwater, at what depth you are, and if you are going into scuba diving, you want the computer to be able to tell you how long to stay on your safety stop according to the types of gas that you're breathing and whatnot. And in terms of user friendliness, you also want to make sure that the computer has like big digits rather than 1,000 many small things that might be hard to look at, especially if you're a beginner. You want it to make like less is more, nice and simple. You also want to make sure that it's got a backlit screen or a light in case you're in a dark environment so that you can see clearly the information that it's giving you. And if you have to choose between buttons or touchscreen, most definitely go buttons, because if you're wearing gloves, it'll be really hard to control the touchscreen. And another extra that you might want to consider if you're going into freediving is having a safety buoy. This is going to be really good if you're thinking of training line diving. So you will set up a buoy, put down a line and go up and down, and that's essentially your training session. But also, even if you're going out into the ocean, it's really important for you to have a safety buoy so that boats that are going around know to look for a diver. So yeah, good investment, safety buoy, bright orange or bright color so that it's easily noticeable, and a dive flag. Now, last but not least, if you're thinking of going into scuba diving, there's some additional pieces of gear that you need. So you'll still need everything that we talked about. Yes, even the snorkel, because when you're in the surface, you want to be able to be breathing through your snorkel rather than using up your air that you're going to need when you go down. Essentially, same as with snorkeling, actually. You don't want the long fins as in freediving. You want the short fins and the open heel ones, because again, the booties will make you warmer in depth. So opt for those fins instead rather than the long freediving fins. Again, nylon weight belt will be fine if you're a scuba diver. With the mask, you probably want tempered glass if you're going further down. You will need a dive computer. And the other additional pieces of gear are firstly the BCD, which is kind of like the little jackety thing that you have that you inflate and deflate to go down and up and control your buoyancy when you're down under. Not in Australia, as in down in the sea. You will also need an octopus, which is a kind of like thing with a lot of cables that comes out of your back that has 2 regulators. One for you to breathe and the other one to have in case of emergency or to help a friend if there's an emergency as well. You will need an air tank, and that's it. Look, I hope this has given you a good introduction to gear. I know that I haven't delved into like the specifics of each of these items. We will cover that in other videos, but I hope that I've given you enough to know at least what you need if you're thinking of going into any of these 3 disciplines. to start thinking about it and start making some decisions. See you next time.